Welcome to Phenomenon Radio, the show that covers thought-provoking breakthroughs in the fields of UAP UFOs to discover fascinating truths, first-hand accounts, and investigative insights into the expanding confluence of physical and mental exposure to this worldwide phenomenon. Hosted by Emmy Award-winning investigative journalists, Earth Files reporter and editor Linda Moulton Howe, and world-renowned experiencer of the 1980 Rendlesham-Bentwaters incident, John Burroughs. And now, leading off tonight's program, here's Linda Moulton Howe.
One of this planet's watchdogs about UFO-related documents is Australian researcher Paul Dean, who has a blog called UFOs Documenting the Evidence. In May of this year, 2017, Paul found an October 2002 United States Department of Defense manual about how armed forces should manage photos, videos, and movie film about UFOs. On page 53 is this title and paragraph, quote, "Unidentified Flying Object, UFO, and Other Aerial Phenomena Imagery." Paul emailed to John Burroughs and me, quote, "This isn't some 1950s or 1960s whatever doctrine. This is from 2002 and departs from the U.S. military's assertions that UFOs and aerial phenomenon are not in their military jurisdiction," close quote. Clearly, DOD wants photographs, videos, and motion film of UFOs. Paul has also kept a close eye on the UK's Ministry of Defence. It was 9 years ago that the MOD proudly announced that it was transferring all of its UFO files to the UK National Archives for public access. A year later, the MOD shut down its so-called UFO desk with this statement, quote, "There is no defense benefit in such UFO investigations, and it would be an inappropriate use of defense resources. Furthermore, responding to reported UFO sightings diverts MOD resources from tasks that are relevant to defense," close quote. But our Phenomenon Radio co-host, John Burroughs, discovered the MOD was not telling the truth after he filed Freedom of Information requests with the MOD in early 2014. That was right after open heart surgery saved his life. Most likely, damage caused by terahertz radiation emitted by the unidentified aerial lights and beams in Rendlesham Forest in December 1980. Because of John's persistent FOIA requests, finally on September 11th, 2014, the MOD admitted that it had withheld 18 UFO UAP related files that included 6 defense policy files on UFO issues. Those are listed with detailed titles that originated with Defense Intelligence 55. DI 55 was also responsible for researching and writing the now famous Condign Report about scientific analysis of unidentified aerial phenomena that concludes even the Rendlesham Forest event was an example where terahertz frequency emissions from the UFO UAP lights and beams can manipulate human minds and damage human tissues, such as the heart of Airman First Class John Burroughs in December 1980. At first, the MOD said it would redact the withheld classified files and then release them to the UK National Archive by sometime in 2015. But it took until last month in June 2017 for the MOD to finally release 15, not 18, of the withheld UFO files to the UK National Archives. The 3 file titles not released are C-31, Air Traffic Control Low Flying UFOs. Apparently, those are very sensitive files, but even the other 15 that were released came with a noose hanging over them in a legal ploy called the Crown copyright. That means publication of anything from the newly released documents requires consent from the National Archives on behalf of the Crown. One British UFO investigator emailed me that he had, quote, sought such Crown permission during the last 24 hours of June 27th to 28th, 2017, to share a few hundred images of the latest batch of UFO documents, close quote. That was Isaac Coy from London, who used his iPhone to photograph pages at the archive. Isaac posted one of the web entitled Secret UK Eyes A. That's a capital A. It's about, quote, aerospace vehicles that have, quote, rapid movement, rapid changes in speed from stationary to very high speeds and accelerations. The UFO sizes range from a few feet to hundreds of feet, with shapes ranging from discs to wedge shapes like a piece of pie, to delta V shapes, to cylinders with lighted windows or rays, and often colored bright lights, close quote. One paragraph is entitled Rendlesham Forest and states, quote, in the early 1980s, a UAP landed outside of RAF Bentwaters in a forest. This incident has been widely reported, and the unit commander raised an incident report that was passed to us, the MOD. All the witnesses were military and included policemen and a lieutenant colonel, which is Charles Halt. Other interesting facts are the proximity to a large base and the apparent absence of any obvious propulsion system on the UAP. There have been subsequent, more detailed reports from personnel who claim that they were there. Also, there seems no doubt that something very strange occurred. The U.S. claimed that no photography was taken, although some eyewitnesses have subsequently claimed that imagery was obtained, close quote. The schizophrenic policy of the UK government saying there is no defense significance to UFOs, while its own Ministry of Defense keeps holding back UFO files, provoked Australian researcher Paul Dean to write, quote, what jumped out in those 18 MOD files were the acronyms ADGE, Air Defense Ground Environment, and ISTAR, Intelligence, Surveillance, Target Acquisition, and Reconnaissance. That's warfighting and battle management. They are both definitely of defense significance. After this short break, Paul Dean in Melbourne, Australia, will join us with UFO historian and author Richard Dolan in Rochester, New York, on Phenomenon Radio to take us all more deeply into UFO documents from the UK, US, and beyond.
Hi, I'm Matt Ray for U.S. Gold Bureau. I cover the market daily. No matter how strong it gets or what long-term predictions say, you can count on one thing as certain. There will be another crash. It will affect your assets. And when it happens, wouldn't you rather be 2 weeks or even 2 months ahead of the curve? Well, Wall Street insiders have been quietly converting their assets into gold for the last few years. Now it's your turn. Buying gold and silver is easier than buying stocks. With the U.S. Gold Bureau's Investor Guide, it's free, and you learn how to buy precious metals in or out of an IRA or 401k retirement plan. Your investment's shipped directly to your home and is 100% insured and guaranteed. You control your investments and shelter them against the stock market, politics, and unknown threats. Act while your dollar is still worth something. Call U.S. Gold Bureau, 800-885-GOLD. U.S. Gold Bureau, 800-885-GOLD, 800-885-GOLD. Call today.
Our world is a world of mysteries, strange disappearances, unusual happenings, mysterious phenomena. And this November, You can learn about the greatest mysteries of our time by joining us on the Mysteries Cruise. Enjoy several days at sea and attend exclusive private lectures with leading personalities like researcher Rosemary Ellen Guiley, author of more than 49 books, including The Gin Connection, podcaster Jim Harold, host of the Paranormal Podcast, and writer and researcher Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report. Set sail this November 8th through the 13th, 2017, aboard the Crown Princess and sail with us into the heart of mystery. And if you make your reservations before July 27th, receive a reduced deposit of $50 per person and onboard coupon booklets with savings of up to $500 in onboard services. Make your reservations before time runs out by visiting mysteriescruise.com today or reserve by phone at 877-642-4308. That number again is 877-642-4308. The mysteries of our time await you. Visit mysteriescruise.com.
Do you or a loved one suffer migraine headaches? Listen to what scientist Kurt Hendricks has to say.
35 million people in the United States suffer with debilitating migraines. If you or a loved one are one of them, you need to know about MiGrelief. Hi, I'm Kurt Hendricks, the scientist that formulated and patented the MiGrelief migraine formula. MiGrelief is a non-prescription dietary supplement recommended by neurologists, pharmacists, and pediatricians to address nutritional deficiencies in both adults and children over 2 with migraines. Try MiGrelief for 3 months and see the powerful difference it can make in your life, or get your money back, no questions asked. Go to MIG911.com or call 800-MIG-7354. You can change your life today.
So if you suffer from migraines, don't wait. Call 800-MIG-7354. That's 800-MIG-7354 or visit MIG911.com.
Okay, so 5 tacos of cheese and a large soda, that's $10,012. Please drive around.
Wait, 10,000 what?
It's obvious you're buzzed and driving.
I've only had a few. I'm fine.
Yeah, the food's $12, but getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Please drive around. Actually, just park and come in.
Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving, because buzz driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Every day, the men and women of the United States Marine Corps stand ready to defend the American way of life. The few, the proud, the Marines.
We are the contact for alternative research topics. The Planet, KGRARadio.com.
Welcome back, and thanks for joining us, everyone. This is Phenomenon Radio Live with John Burroughs and Linda Moulton Howe, and we're ready to kick off this 45-minute uninterrupted segment with tonight's very special guests, Richard M. Dolan, U.S. historian, author, and lecturer, and then all the way from the southern hemisphere of Australia, the intrepid Paul Dean. To start tonight's interview, here's Linda Moulton Howe.
Hi, Paul and Rich. It is wonderful to have both of you back on Phenomenon Radio again with John Burroughs and me. And I thought that what we'd start off with, Paul, is your reaction to this very important sentence that was in that secret UK Eyes A document that came out in June because that Philip Coy in London was able to get, or Isaac Coy in London was able to get an iPhone sitting in the archive of this page. And on it, it was John Burroughs who said to me on the phone, this may be the first time that there's actually been a sentence by a government agency that says this, quote, in the early 1980s, a UAP landed outside of RAF Bentwaters in a forest. This incident has been widely reported, and the unit commander raised an incident report that was passed to us, meaning the MOD. Now, what I'd like to do is to throw this to John Burroughs, who feels this is one of the most important sentences that has emerged, even though we didn't get all 18 full files. And John, take it away.
I'd like to get both of your responses, Rich and Paul, after I kind of throw this little tidbit in. Number one, when he said incident report, that's the difference between an incident report and a memo, which means most likely the MOD got our incident report that, for all intents and purposes, was classified because they claimed they lost it. So they didn't lose it. Those things are highly guarded and accounted for. So they told CNN they lost the reports. It's no different than when they got to that point in their file release, the MOD did when they were doing the releases and the DIS files were missing. There was like 400 pages of stuff on Rendlesham that wasn't there because they said they destroyed them. So you've got two factors right there. Now you have a memo. I mean, you have a memo. This is an official British memo. Inside their files, they had 6 policy files. This was in one of them, okay? And in it, they're talking back and forth amongst each other, and they said directly that a UAP landed in the forest.
John, I fully agree. This is, to my knowledge as well, the only time the MOD formally, officially admitted, don't even want to say acknowledged, admitted that an unknown object landed where everyone claimed that it did. They were never willing to go that far. And at least amongst themselves, they absolutely have admitted that. And I consider that, as you do, very, very significant indeed. And it's not the first time, it won't be the last that military government agencies lie to the public about these sorts of things. They do that as a matter of policy. So we shouldn't be shocked, but it's very good fortune that we have in our hands proof, and I wouldn't even say this is anything other than proof, that amongst themselves they've acknowledged that this is indeed the case. And a UFO/UAP landed on UK territory.
It's the strongest statement. I've studied the MOD's files at length, and there is of course the original Rendlesham releases back in 2008, where there was like when Nick Pope as in Air Secretary at A2SA took over the UFO desk as a part-time duty along with other duties. He had a quick relook into Rendlesham, and of course at the same time, Lord Peter Hill Norton, who was an admiral for the fleet and who was the chief of the defence staff, which is a bit equivalent of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in America. He was writing letters back and forward to the MOD about the issue, and like I said, there was an investigation into the radiation readings, an investigation into how it was responded to in various internal memoranda and administrative documents. But this particular sentence that you've just quoted, I actually saw that when the MOD files were sort of released a few weeks ago. I had someone actually go in there, and I saw that sentence very quickly. And it is certainly the most direct and powerful sentence that's been sort of been condensed into one section of text, rather than reading, like a 400-page file, which we've had before, which is mostly just duplicate copies of the same stuff, media releases, media responses. This is like a direct statement that was classified secret, eyes only, UK government only. This is what you would call a very, very incredibly condensed summary. That actually admits that in all likelihood, that the series of UFO events that were between Bentwaters and Woodbridge Air Force bases in the forest were significant and did actually happen.
It has always struck me that when the MOD would go through a new release of documents, I mean, so much of what they released was just redundant, duplicate, really saying nothing that was new. There are documents in there that have new information, yes, but so much was just fluff and padding. I'm sure you agree.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you go through some of the MOD documents, you randomly pick ones from, I'll say 1979. You open the PDF, 283 pages long. It astounds me. Even the United States do better than this. It astounds me how much junk is in there. Duplicate copies of media responses to, and requests from radio stations to interview the MOD. Endless requests from TV stations. Clippings of newspaper articles with big lines through them. lists of phone numbers between air traffic control centres and
nonsensical, meaningless information.
It's really, really, really low level administrative and clerical information. Not to say, like you say, there are some really good files in there. There's some really good cases, good case analysis, some poor case analysis on really good cases, some very, very interesting letters from the public. But 90% of what's in the MOD files dating back really to the, say, 1965 is really, really low level stuff. I mean, I've seen files where there is like 60 pages, almost in a row of stuff that you could almost toss out. It is that bad.
I want to bring this up then, okay? Because a couple of things stand out. Number one, you have 18 files. Those 18 files didn't exist according to the MOD because they said they were finished in 2013. I use Condyne, okay, to go in and start asking questions, okay? And a couple of things about Condyne also stand out. Number one, these 18 files, 6 of them are policy. One of them that they've held back is the policies that went back and forth inside the MOD with the different agencies. But the thing that stands out with that is they have policies on UFOs, UAPs. UFOs was a nomenclature they used until 2000. Now, I'm not sure because that's an important matter that people need to understand. They did not announce this as a press release like they did with all their other files. They kept it low key. Matter of fact, somebody that works for KGRA got an email saying they'd released them. So no one knew they were about to be released. They got released. There was no press. They make it impossible to get them, as Linda said in her intro. And so much of it is redacted. That's the other big thing. That even what you can look at, if you're willing to go down there and look at it, most of it's still redacted. So these 18 files must be very important, number one. And number two, Condyne is one thing, and you brought up Nick Pope, Paul Dean, but Nick Pope, and most people that listen to him know, he's pretty skeptical just about UFOs in nature. He doesn't really say there's much to it, but he puts his hat on a coat rack as far as he hangs his hat on Condyne. He says Condyne is the most important document, and within Condyne, it's mostly about radiation, frequencies, and UAPs. So exactly what are they hiding? Do you guys think they're hiding? And just how come the press has missed this? And just how significant do you think this is? And then the last question would be for you both to go back and forth is, why did they hold back 3 files, do you think?
Looking at document releases of the last decade. And a lot of it that really turned me on to this is Paul's work, but also looking at the Condyne release, which is that how much UFO data or UAP data is hidden in places within government agencies and files probably around the world that we would never even think to look. We can't just assume that we're going to look into the obvious places, petition the Air Force for UFO records and ask for UFO files. We really have to learn to be smart about this, and you have learned this, John, and Paul Dean has definitely learned this, where when you're looking at documents and looking for documents, we researchers have to learn to do this the right way, because so much gold is hidden in places that ordinarily we wouldn't think to look, and I have to think this is by design. The reason that files are constantly being withheld and missing is not difficult at all to understand. It is because there's a stalling game that is in place. It's very obvious. We are dealing with a phenomenon that is extraordinary, that is beyond our official civilization's capability, and that is disruptive. And so there is never going to be cooperation coming from those agencies. Never. It'll just be pulling teeth, and again until we get what researchers are looking for, and guys like yourself and Paul are right on the front lines doing this.
The places where me and some of my friends have started looking are the most are so out of the way. I mean, in the United States, the obvious place to go is the United States Air Force, particularly Air Combat Command, the old Foreign Technology Division, which is now the National Air Space Intelligence Center, and so on. But we've found that well and truly beyond that, there is every single place you look now in the United States government, from a military or an intelligence or flight civil agency angle, holds some sort of UFO records. Now, I'll give you an example. We've started with military agencies, like whether it's army battalions right down to companies, or within, say, the United States Air Force, from wing level down to squadron level and so on. When at the end of each year, a unit, like a wing or a squadron or a group or a battalion or a naval task force or whatever, will produce a document called a history, and sometimes they're called a command chronology. And me and some researchers like Barry Greenwood in Boston have started going through thousands and thousands of these so-called unit histories or command chronologies for the Vietnam War. So typically a history might be, 1968 to 1969, command chronology, 56 artillery.
Hey, Paul, can I jump in on something real fast, because I'll forget this later? Oh, when I was back on active duty, I was down at Maxwell, and that's where the Air Force has their wing history, right?
Yep.
So to go in there, you have to have a secret clearance, okay, to get documents. So I went in and had them pull the Bentwaters Woodbridge file, wing history for 1980. Guess what month was missing?
Oh, really? Yeah.
December. December of 1980 was missing.
Yeah, that
whole month was gone. It was purged from the files and was classified.
Yeah,
so I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Well, there you go.
I'm not making this up. I was shocked. And the guy, they brought down the GS-18 because I was bitching. And because you had to go in the day before, request them. And then come back the next day. I was bitching. I go, come on, the whole month? Give me a break. And the guy was like, why do you want to know? And I told him. And he says, that's probably why they're pulled. They've classified the whole month because of the incident itself. He says, we don't like it, but that's the way they do these things. So.
Yeah, they've done that. Obviously the event was embarrassing. It involved probably breakdowns in communication and a loss of security at the base. It involved the deputy base commander, like the Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt. The whole thing, I mean, base unit histories, command chronologies, and base histories usually aren't classified that highly, confidential or secret. But to keep that in there when it's clearly going to come out, like the United States Air Force, someone within, say, the Defense Intelligence Services, or somewhere within Policy and Plans, United States Air Force headquarters, would have probably way back. It's not Maxwell's fault. They're just a repository at the Air Force History Research Agency. Someone's probably pulled that and using it for further analysis, or simply pulling it because it is just embarrassing. But anyway, like I was saying before, Barry Greenwood and I have been going through command chronologies from Vietnam, and the amount of time. Now, remember, this is all while the Condon project, the Condon UFO study team was trying to wind up Blue Book, which was the United States Air Force's sort of debunking bogus 20-year investigative study of the UFO phenomenon. So while the UFO investigation and evaluation program within the United States was winding up, in Vietnam, we see in these command chronologies and these base histories and unit histories, we see UFO cases get mentioned constantly, UFO evaluations get mentioned constantly. We've actually found something called, and I quote, a UFO tracking network operated by the 7th Air Force in Vietnam. Now, this is all laid out in formally classified command chronologies and base histories. And so the average UFO researcher would think, a documents researcher in the USA would generally think, we'll go to the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, go back to the Central Intelligence Agency, and of course the United States Air Force. But who would think to go to United States Marine Corps and United States Army histories and command chronologies at battalion and brigade and even company level? Amazing. To find? It's astounding. I mean, I'll give you an example. Just one example. I mean, there's hundreds, but there's one called there's a document I've got in front of me called the 23rd Infantry Division's Chulai Defense Command, and it's a daily study. It's a huge group of documents called daily staff journals. And one of them, for January 6, 1969, says here, and I quote, so this is written down at company level within the United States Army in the Infantry Division 23rd. Quote, Tower 72 reports object flying into their area about 700 metres in front of them, 310 degrees. Object came in slow over the ASP and landed. When object moves, it has glowing light. It is about 15 to 20 feet across. It is shaped like a big egg. Control Tower reports their radars did not pick up anything. Object also doesn't seem to have any sound when it moves. Right, now this is just dryly listed with other things like, Sergeant Smith has broken his ankle. We've got, someone has been cutting up the barbed wire fences outside Tower Block 72. We're running out of diesel for the Jeeps. And then you've got something like this, and it's just dryly put in there. And you think, and that this is what you would call a low-level document. So a high-level document, I'll give you an example of a slightly more high-level document. Operational reports, lessons learned, headquarters, 1st Field Force, Vietnam, April 1969. During March, there were 190 UFO sightings. The next page, during April, there were 46 UFO sightings. Another one says, during the entire reporting period, concerted efforts were made to identify UFOs. Further discussion of these efforts is precluded by the classification of this report, which means that they're prepared to discuss the word UFO and that they're trying to identify UFOs, but any discussion in this document, which is already classified secret, is precluded, not included. Now, someone might say, aren't they just dealing with helicopters? I mean, isn't this all just unknown helicopters? Well, no, it's not, because the few actual reports that we do have, because we've got a lot of data, like a lot of numbers and dates and so on, but the few detailed reports of UFOs that we do actually have are definitely not helicopters, no sound, electromagnetic effects, blinding lights, etc. But then you see this. 2 special projects were established to observe UFOs from Kong Thien, the highest hill in the eastern DMZ area. The primary mission of Have Fear, that's the program, did not concern the helicopter reports. So there you go. So I've had a skeptic tell me it must be to do with Soviet or North Vietnamese Viet Cong like Hound helicopters. And then you read these UFOs, quote, did not concern the helicopter reports.
How many helicopters did the North Vietnamese or with Soviet equipment actually have anyway? I mean, I never had the impression that they had much to begin with.
That's the thing. I've actually looked into this. Now, the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong did have at the start of the war companies of helicopters. Now there was these lumbering hound and mill, like these lumbering hound helicopters with huge blades. Half the time they're leaking oil everywhere and everything. Now up against the might of the 7th Air Force and up against the might of things like the 6th Anti-Aircraft Battalion,
they would have no chance.
Exactly. So by 1969, 1970, we're in a situation where, and I quote, helicopters or possible helicopters are being seen all over Vietnam, even in the south. And yet we know I haven't got the numbers in front of me or the command chronologies or the technical data in front of me, but we know that the North Vietnamese were massively running low on helicopter force by the end of the war. I mean, they had to be. The first thing you take out is aerial supremacy and transport and things like ground logistics and the transport of munitions and so on. The first thing you take out. We know that there was incredible amount of the 7th Air Force, particularly F-4 Phantoms and barrage rocketry from the Marine Corps and so on, were taking out helicopters.
And just think about how ludicrous the helicopter explanation has to be when you consider they have, substandard helicopters to begin with, not many of them, and then yet we're going to be issuing reports from the U.S. About these incredible helicopters that no one knows how to deal with. I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah, so yeah, it is absurd. Some of them will be helicopters. There's no doubt. But I'll give you an example. What's really curious? Some of the United States Marine Corps' daily staff journals for 1969 actually have statements like this. It'll say something like, "Platoon C has noted possible unknown helicopters to the north of their location. Platoon C has also noted 2 UFOs south." So there's that distinction. You've got a platoon of men, 12 men, with a commanding officer and so on. They're noting possible unknown helicopters to the north, but to the south, they're noting in their daily staff journals and their incident reports, they're noting UFOs to the north or west or whatever. So you've got that distinction. If a debunker, and so a lot of them will be helicopters early on. Some of them are even friendly helicopters. But when you've got this distinction, I've seen dozens of these. You've got this distinction where they're saying, we've seen unknown helicopters or possible unknown helicopters to the north, and then we've seen 1 UFO to the south. You're thinking, what if they're all helicopters, or if they're all, say, fixed-wing rotary aircraft or whatever, why not just say that? And some of the reports do get a bit more detailed. I've seen one where it says UFO landed, electromagnetic effects are apparent. Right, so that's the breakdown of walkie-talkie community. Yeah, it's astounding. So,
right.
So it is now, going back to the moral of the story, is we never thought in 2017 we're just starting to get stuck into these sort of records, and we're finding them absolutely everywhere. And so what I was going to say about England was, if there's one thing you notice, when you go through the released British Ministry of Defence Air Secretariat for DS8 and DI55 and DI6 files from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and then this latest release of 15 out of 18 previously withheld files, when you go through, and this is a bombshell, if you go through them, there is something glaringly, unbelievably obvious missing. Right, the majority of the material in these files is from civilians, like civilian reports. Quite a few from things like police, from quite a few from the British Royal Air Force. But what's glaringly missing is where throughout 50,000 pages or whatever it is of British Ministry of Defence files has been released, where are all the reports from the British Army? Where are all the reports from the British Navy? What about the Army Reserves and the Naval Reserves? Where are all the cases or reports or analysis from the intelligence community? So, it just astounds me that you can go through, Britain has an enormous Navy and Britain has an enormous Army, yet there are literally a handful, like literally something like 5 cases, Army and Navy and Army Reserves and Naval Reserves and, whatever cases in there. You think, where are all the battalion and brigade level UFO reports from the British Army, and where are all the task force and, say, destroyer or battleship reports and analysis? They're just not there. You can't tell me that with an enormous Navy and Army that there was virtually not a single UFO report, even if they are just drones or whatever, not a single report from the Army or the Navy in something like 60 years. Get off
This has always been the case with them, and I agree with you completely. And I've always looked at the MOD releases as just nothing other than PR. But I think I was not quite accurate with that, and I think for that reason, I and many other people, but I missed the significance of the Condine report when it was released. Because to be perfectly candid with you, I just said, oh, I'm sure there's nothing in there like nothing else that they've released. And that was my fatal mistake. I didn't really go into that until people like John did, to really find the key elements that are very significant. But overall, I fully agree with you, Paul, that the MOD would play this great propaganda game. The best way to keep a secret is to pretend to share it. That's what I thought that they were really doing. Give up nonsensical, meaningless information, holding back all of the military reports. As you said, I've also been waiting. Where's the Army, Navy reports? Where's their internal analyses of the phenomenon, which you almost never would find.
Well, I spoke to Nick Pope about this, and he said, I said, where are all the Army and Navy cases, honestly? And he said, look, don't be surprised if a lot of them are stopped at the door. You know, at company level, commanding officer level, platoon level, a lot of even quite significant UFO reports will simply be dealt with as incident reports or statutory declarations or minor operational reports or air safety hazard reports or disposition statements or whatever on paper. Some of them will be stopped. There will be a number stopped at squadron level or task force level, even on ship level. And they simply, with the amount of paperwork that in the military battlefield or in training exercises, the amount of records that are generated, messages, staff journal, entrance logs, medical information, supply and logistics, the amount of paperwork that's presented, you could easily get, even a provocative UFO report could get lost within the system. I mean, that's not to say that if there's anything really serious, like say a British airborne early warning and control aircraft actually was, say, buzzed for 40, I'm just making this up, say buzzed for 45 minutes over, I don't know, over the Persian Gulf, and the RAF Bomber Command, or the integrated and joint recognized air picture people, you know, on the AWACS aircraft are probably going to insist that an analysis is done, if for nothing else, for air safety and operational safety perspective. But I mean, those cases simply aren't there, you know.
Well, Paul, here's an example. Okay, during our incident, the British had one of their warships off the coast. Okay,
sure.
When they went back and they did FOIA and they requested the log, you know, and everything that went on.
Yeah.
The MOD replied that it got blown overboard.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
So that's what I'm saying. So they're there. They're just classified.
Yeah.
It's just no different than the DIS files that were missing on the Rendlesham case. They openly admitted that, number one, they shouldn't have been destroyed. Number two, the way they were destroyed was not proper because they had to have a log of why. So they were never destroyed. They're just saying they were destroyed because they'll catch flack for that. But if they admit they're classified, that's going to just be a lot worse than saying they lost them or they were destroyed.
Yeah, because then they'll have to share them.
In the 1960s to the 1970s in the United States, we had all of these cases of UFOs that were interacting of our Minuteman missile silos.
Sure.
And so by December of 1980, it means that whoever was there at RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge, they must have at some point been briefed on UFO matters, and that Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, he's always said that he thought that the night of December 28th, that he was seeing beams coming down out of something in the sky into the weapons storage area at the WSA, where we now know that there were tactical nuke weapons on both sides, Bentwater and Woodbridge, which was a secret then. But the thing was, Halt thought that the beams were coming down into the WSA. People in the tower that we've interviewed say that they didn't see a beam come down into the WSA, but there has always been this murky area. What if part of what happened at RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge related to an intrusion or an interaction or a manipulation of tactical weapons in either the Woodbridge or the Bentwaters side, sending some kind of message that nobody has been exposed to yet, but would have moved this immediately in 24 hours up to the NSA?
It's easy. The answer is easy. That if the tactical nuclear warheads that were probably at Bentwaters and Woodbridge, if they were interfered with, if their guidance, say their cooling systems or their burst and their various like their trigger systems were interfered with, there was
Paul, I'll tell you this. Halt has gone on the record and said that it was really weird the way he handled it, because what he said in Britain and then what he said publicly to everybody was that the codes were messed with.
Yeah, well, look, I back in the 60s and 70s, we actually know. So the controlling agency for the design, maintenance, and so on of nuclear weapons back then was Air Force Systems Command and the Air Force Test Evaluation Center, and who else was there? Strategic Air Command, Scientific and Technical Center. So if nuclear weapons are in any way, it's actually called something like a bent spear. A lost nuclear weapon is a broken arrow, and I think an interfered with nuclear weapon is something like a bent spear. But it's an operation. It's what we call an operational Category 3, an OPREP 3 report. And any nuclear weapons that have been damaged or interfered with, or in some way have started to malfunction or pass their use by date, are dealt with by Air Force, back then Air Force Systems Command. Now, interestingly, I actually found a document. Now, this is really interesting. There's virtually no documents in the United States' released material, United States government, whether it's Air Force Systems Command or Foreign Technology Division, whatever, base histories, whatever. There's virtually no documents that actually link UFOs. I mean, there is reports sent to Blue Book via telex, but as far as discussion pieces, opinion pieces, technical reports, there's virtually nothing that link UFOs with nuclear weapons. However, I found a document. Well, I didn't find this. Dr. Michael Swords did, but he didn't realize he'd found it until I found it. But what happened was, some of you will know that the project, the UFO study team that closed down Project Blue Book, was a 2-year study that ended in a 900-page report called the Condon UFO Study Report for the University of Colorado. Now, it was headed up by Edwin U. Condon and had various doctors, various scientists, and so on. Now, it's a 900-page book. You can actually buy it. I mean, you can get it online. It's famous. It helped Brigadier Carol H. Belinda close down the Project Blue Book's UFO study investigation. Now, what's interesting is the background material that went into the Condon project, the background material. So we've got a 900-page report from 1969. The background material amounts to some 10,000 pages. That's budgetary information. That's things like trip notes, interview notes, photographic analysis, stuff that you can't obviously publish, because no one can publish a 10,000-page book, and it's scrappy and it's handwritten notes and so on. We've finally got access to that material. We've finally got access to what you would call the citable source material of the Condon project, and there is a trip note in here. Robert Lowe, who was one of the scientists that worked on the UFO
he
study.
Was Condon's number 2 in the program.
That's right. Well, in February, he visited Kirkland Air Force Base in February of 1968 as part of a field investigation to discuss UFOs with Kirkland Air Force Base at various agencies such as Air Force Safety Inspection and so on. And he wrote down trip notes. So Lowe wrote down like trip notes, and one of them honestly says this: checked classified aspects of electromagnetic effects possibly associated with UFO sightings near a Minuteman missile base. Results of the discussion were inconclusive in that it cannot be ruled out that UFOs were the cause of the effects observed at the base. Nothing more can, within security limitations, be said. So what we've got here, we've got Dr. Robert Lowe actually discussing, probably with lieutenant colonels and colonels, the situation where the Air Force System Command missiles in Montana and South Dakota and so on had been possibly interfered with by nuclear weapons. And here's Robert Lowe actually writing down an unclassified trip note saying, he's checking with classified aspects of electromagnetic effects associated with UFO sightings near Minuteman missiles. And then he's saying that the situation cannot be ruled out, and that nothing more can be said on this piece of paper, right? So,
I love that. I love hearing that, because Lowe, not only was he the number 2 to Condon, but Lowe himself, I pointed this out in my very first book 17 years ago, was a former intelligence officer who had done some serious covert work for in Albania, among other places. One of the guys he worked with was Kim Philby, the famous British double agent. But Lowe had done classified work way, way back then, and it just is coincidence, I guess one could say, that he was the number 2 guy at Colorado under Condon. I mean, clearly he was there to help make sure conclusions ended up the way they needed to. And of course, it was Lowe. I'll just state the obvious. Everyone here in this program knows, but maybe listeners don't know. Lowe wrote the famous Lowe Memorandum, as it was called at the time, where in the early days of the project, in fact, before they agreed to take on the project from the Air Force, Lowe was talking about the pros and cons of University of Colorado doing a UFO study. And he said, and this is a paraphrase, but he said, the trick for us will be, and he used the word trick, to conduct a study that to all public appearances seems like a genuine effort to get to the truth, but to scientists we're going through it with the expectation of never even knowing that we'll never find a saucer. I think something like that. In other words,
it's called the trick memo. He says, I think the trick would be,
right. And that's roughly speaking what he said. So I'm just glad that you were able to find this additional little nugget. It's just more evidence pointing out, in this particular case, the sham nature of the Condon report, in the sense that not that the investigations themselves done by that committee were all a sham. They were not. In fact, there were some legitimate people doing hard work there who very quickly realized that the hierarchy, Condon and Lowe, were dead set against a positive conclusion coming to UFOs, and this is just more evidence of that.
My brother was in the Air Force and was stationed at Malmstrom in the 75-76 time period. And I was producing medical programming in Boston at a WCVB when one night late, writing a script, the phone rang, and it was my brother who said, Linda, a UFO has sat down on the base. And what unfolded was that they had been at a wing party and all of the emergency buzzers went off. He had emergency codes. He had to take a high-ranking person in his helicopter, my brother's helicopter. They were in the air. They were hearing the sabotage alert team communicating with Central Security Command about the fact that they had something they were estimating was at least 300 feet in diameter, fluorescent orange, was sitting right down over Kilo 7, I think it was, and that there was this drama of the SAT team saying that it would blink out, and they would say that they knew jets were scrambled, and they were warning you. It's blinked, it's disappeared, but we know it couldn't be gone because there was no time. It's just popping on and off like a light. And all of this, my brother heard. Well, within 2 days, and my brother was involved because he was ordered to go out in a helicopter and try to reproduce some patterns that they had in grass in areas around the missiles and other places where they had animal mutilations simultaneously at the same time. And he said that one of his colleagues was involved where they came and they lifted out that missile where that big orange fluorescent UFO had been close over and then rose up and Dopplered off the radar at about 200,000 feet. And that they took the missile out. And then later my brother was told, you won't believe this. Just the targeting code, which would be binary, zeros and ones on the magnetic tape inside that Minuteman missile, only the targeting information was changed. And when my brother said, to what? He said, you don't want to be put in prison. That it's closed case.
Nobody would not say what it was targeted to.
But just think about that, Rich, Paul, and John. That
the capability to do that.
I'm secondhand, but that was specific. My brother was there involved. And the fact that targeting information alone in a magnetic stripe tape of zeros and ones could be selectively changed. And you guys know those missiles are down, 80 feet underground.
Yeah, there's no way that this sort of stuff was ever. I mean, people say that Project Blue Book is kind of the final word. There might be a bit of stuff after that, but there is no way this sort of technical and very, very specific information or case positions within the United States sort of military is ever going to make it into unclassified and open slather material that's going to get to Congress and to the state legislators and to the public and the media. I mean, it is bizarre. This is what I say. I mean, there's just everywhere we look for every single agency.
Just talk about the capabilities that would be involved to do what Linda just described. Yeah. So you've got something with the knowledge of the targeting codes. So they would have to know what they are. They would have to know how to change those to other targets. They would have to be able to have the technical means to penetrate, not just through 80 feet of ground and who knows how else it's blocked, but to get through the defenses of the electronic systems itself, which I'm assuming have some kind of shielding and defenses as well.
Ceramic.
All of that is just unbelievable, and to do it from some aerial vantage point far above the base.
But I want to bring up a point, and this is why I go back to what I said about Nick Pope hanging his hat on Condyne. It's EM frequencies, okay? It's certain types of radiation. Because if you go into Condyne itself says right in there, and that was a point that was brought up in our book, Encounters and Rendlesham Forest, was when we went in front of General Williams, he didn't really ask many questions. And when you go into Condyne, it says in there that wing commanders are briefed on UAP effects, that aircraft have been brought down, not just in the UK and the United States, but in the Soviet Union, that they actually formed a panel to include astronauts, which before Edgar Mitchell died, I asked him, he was on one of those panels. So it really does come down to frequencies. It comes down to EMs, fields and effects, which is all where we're going with our new weaponry. And so you're right, they're going to keep it classified. But even with plasmas, it's been proven now you can hide and cloak inside a plasma ball.
Wait, say that again, John. You can hide and cloak.
Whatever's inside a plasma ball is cloaked. In other words, what I'm saying is that whatever's in it can't be detected, can't be seen.
Well, plasma can be seen though, so I don't really.
But not what's inside the plasma, and that's one of the biggest reasons why they've worked so hard on plasma technology to include. There's a good possibility that those facilities outside Woodbridge Base, they were working on plasma technology. So it's almost like when you talk about Star Trek and when they go into warp drive, the shields itself and everything else. This is all the effects that we're going towards.
Wow. I hadn't really thought about plasma as a cloaking or shielding technology simply because plasmas are so bright and easy to see, but you make an interesting point. Things can be hidden inside that.
Well, isn't that part of the history of people saying that they saw in a blue sky white cloud form, and then out of the white cloud at some point somebody else would see a disk come out? And this idea is that the phenomena has used the atmospheric clouds themselves as camouflage, which would then be back to them generating plasmas in which to camouflage their existence in the clouds.
Yeah, I don't know.
It would also mean you're not going to get it on radar most of the time either.
Yeah, because radar, primary radar relies on something fairly solid to reflect. Say it's an S-band radar, I don't know, 3.1 gigahertz or whatever it is. It relies on something solid to reflect back just even a small percentage of the transmitted signal back to the receiver. So, plasma may not be responsive to radar whatsoever. Don't know.
Well, they've declassified this, so I can talk about it.
Yeah.
The stealth fighter, it was the paint somewhat in the build of it, but they had plasma generators that they actually mounted on the aircraft, and that's what it made it invisible on radar.
Yeah.
Wait, the stealth F-117A was not rendered invisible because of its
shape. Its shape and paint. I've heard rumors that even the stealth bomber, which is the B2 had electrical field generation around it, but I've never actually seen it may just be an internet rumor.
No, it's not. It was on the F-117 site. That's why I'm saying I can talk about it now.
So I want to make sure I understand you.
There's an F-117 site, and they actually had them mounted on the wings, and they showed the pictures of it. It was a whole article about how they used to make the A7 look invisible, but in reality, it has to do with the plasma generators that they put on the aircraft itself.
John, you're saying that's the primary method by which the...
Yes, that's the primary. Yes, the shape of it somewhat, and the paint was important, but it's the ability to generate the plasma field that made it invisible.
Wow.
I've never seen that's well, if someone's got a link, I don't know, like a rare citable reference for that, that'd be good.
I'll get it to you afterwards, Paul. I was shocked
on that.
I was shocked to see that released. It was an actual thing that they were doing the history of the F-117, and they actually showed a picture of one of the aircraft with those on there. And the reason why I could talk about it now is because I was around the aircraft, and I didn't know a lot about it, but I knew those particular pieces.
Well, I want to challenge this a little bit, and I'm probably foolish to challenge you, and I know we got to go to break, but I remember reading a little bit about the history of the development of stealth during the late 60s and 70s. I don't know, John. I never heard a thing about plasmas.
Because that is, and we're going to break, and we can take this up after the break.
Yeah.
But that is the whole key to the development of everything, to include interstellar travel, guys. I'm just saying, I'm not trying to tie this into aliens or anything else. I don't know. I don't know where we've learned this or how we've totally developed this. But the whole thing generates, and that's why I say Nick Pope hangs his hat on this. Condign holds the key to a lot of this, it appears.
It's a very important report.
Extremely. And we're due for a break. We'll be right back, folks.
This 45-minute uninterrupted segment of Phenomenon Radio Live is brought to you by OnlineVibes.com, your personal connection to mind, body, and spirit, committed to connecting you with healing modalities that can manifest a true and healthy change in your life. Visit the website at OnlineVibes.com. That's OnlineVibes.com. Tonight's very special guests, Richard M. Dolan and Paul Dean, will join the show once again right after these messages. Stay with us.
Our world is a world of mysteries, strange disappearances, unusual happenings, mysterious phenomena. And this November, you can learn about the greatest mysteries of our time by joining us on the Mysteries Cruise. Enjoy several days at sea and attend exclusive private lectures with leading personalities like researcher Rosemary Ellen Guiley, author of more than 49 books, including The Gin Connection, podcaster Jim Harold, host of the Paranormal Podcast, and writer and researcher Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report. Set sail this November 8th through the 13th, 2017, aboard the Crown Princess and sail with us into the heart of mystery. And if you make your reservations before July 27th, receive a reduced deposit of $50 per person and onboard coupon booklets with savings of up to $500 in onboard services. Make your reservations before time runs out by visiting mysteriescruise.com today or reserve by phone at 877-642-4308. That number again is 877-642-4308. The mysteries of our time await you. Visit mysteriescruise.com.
Every 2 seconds, someone needs blood. Whether it's a natural disaster or one single child suffering from illness, the American Red Cross stands ready to supply blood when it's most needed. But blood is a perishable product. Therefore, it must continuously be replenished. You can safely donate blood every 56 days. The need is constant and patients are waiting. Call your American Red Cross at 1-800-GIVE-LIFE to schedule your life-saving appointment. Please give blood today. Patients are depending on you.
Your contact for current news and trending topics. KGRARadio.com.
Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to the KGRA digital broadcasting station, Salt Lake City, Utah, Van Buren, Arkansas, and this is Phenomenon Radio Live. Your awesome hosts, Linda Moulton Howe and John Burroughs, have pulled together another great program tonight with U.S. historian and author Richard M. Dolan and UFO researcher, archivist, and investigator all the way over from the Southern Hemisphere, Paul Dean in Australia. But before we can get to hour 2 of tonight's program, it's time for the news, brought to you by earthfiles.com. Here once again is Linda Moulton Howe.
June 2017 was the 390th month in a row that the Earth's global temperature has been warmer than average. Satellite data shows that our planet has been warming since 1998 more than twice as fast as scientists expected. A couple of weeks ago, on July 12th, NASA's Aqua satellite photographed the trillion-ton Larsen C ice shelf after it broke off from the Antarctic Peninsula into the surrounding ocean. It's the size of the state of Delaware, one of the biggest on record. Larsen C floated on the ocean, fed by glaciers that are on land above sea level. So even though Larsen's trillion tons of ice won't add to sea level rise, what is behind it will. Current estimates are that if all the glacier ice that the Larsen C ice shelf has kept from getting into the ocean is suddenly freed to move forward, global ocean waters will rise 4 inches. That's 10 centimeters. Lots of ice is melting in the Arctic and the Greenland too. April 2017, sea ice extent tied April 2016 for the smallest amount of Arctic ice since satellite records began in 1979. The decline of Greenland's ice sheet isn't just icebergs breaking off like Antarctica. 2014 satellite data and computer modeling indicate that 70% of the annual 269 billion tons of snow and ice shed by Greenland was lost through surface melt, not iceberg calving. The accelerating surface melt has doubled Greenland's contribution to global sea level rise. Quote, nobody expected the ice sheet to lose so much mass so quickly, says geophysicist Isabella Belliconia of the University of California in Irvine. She says in a warning, things are happening a lot faster than we expected, close quote. All of that melting Arctic ice also stores microbes. In Alaska, researchers have already discovered residues of the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic that infected 500 million people and killed at least 100 million, then about 5% of the world's population. 2 months ago, in May 2017, the BBC in London reported that scientists are also worried about smallpox and bubonic plague microbes trapped in Siberian ice. Already in 2016, a boy was killed, 20 other people were infected, and 2,000 reindeer were sickened by anthrax released when melting permafrost in Russia exposed the frozen carcass of a reindeer that died from anthrax bacteria 75 years ago. As Earth continues to warm from the increasing greenhouse gas blanket in the atmosphere, global warming is expected to scramble our ecosystems, where insects spread along with diseases into new frontiers. 2 of the new growing threats are the Zika virus and malaria, both carried by mosquitoes. For every degree increase in temperature, malaria reproduces 10 times faster. That is one reason why the World Bank estimates that in about 30 years, in 2050, malaria will be a threat to 5.2 billion people. This is Linda Moulton Howe. Please stay tuned to Earth Files news updates on KGRA Radio and visit every day my science, environment, and Real X-Files news website, earthfiles.com, for more on breaking stories about our universe, this solar system, and the planet we live on.
And that's the news brought to you by the award-winning website, earthfiles.com. Now back to the program.
Thanks, Race. When we went to the break, we were going a little bit into Project Condign and plasmas and UAPs. And one of the things that I want to highlight on, which I think is a key to some of this, because again, like I said, I don't want to go after Nick too hard, but Nick is pretty skeptical on most of this, but the one thing he really stands his ground on is Condign, UAPs, and when you go into the report, and that was the way I attacked the FOIA. And I'll bring this up early as we go along. I was able to get them to admit, and I've had some people from the British press contact me as far as wanting me to give them the document, and they wanted to go after the MOD because there was actually a question on the floor of the House of Lords about this. Have they been able to develop any technology or weaponry off of the phenomenon, the UAP, which is in Condign? And the MOD said no. But I actually hold a FOIA saying they did. And the interesting thing about that FOIA was it wasn't really the MOD themselves, so they weren't totally lying to the lords themselves. It's actually been farmed out to defense companies, which actually hold a patent and have worked on this within the military complex. But ultimately, when you look at plasma and the fact that it can be used to cloak, maybe interstellar travel, which is warp drive, what the nuts and bolts guys will say, well, it's only been created or can only been seen for this long. That's the cloaking device. And the military itself would want to look at it from a concept of how can we use this for stealth? How can we use this for the ability for travel, as far as the communications and everything else. So that would be a good reason why it would be classified still. But everything about Condign, and so much of it is still classified, and even these files show you that it's the next level of travel, weaponry, and maybe even interdimensional travel. So for Rich, I'd like to get where you think this may fall into place. And for Paul, have you seen in the documents UAP where they first started changing nomenclature from UFOs to UAPs?
So who's going first? Want me to go
Rich,
first?
Go ahead, go first. Yeah, Rich, go ahead.
Well, we had a little bit of a break that the listeners didn't get a chance to hear. And during that, you discussed, and I strongly agreed, the idea of frequency and dimensions and plasma. And we kind of got into all of those things. And I'll just add, it's coming to me more and more from credible sources. And I mean, I'm talking about people who are within places like NASA, for example, high-level NASA, who apparently strongly believe in multiverse theories, multi-dimensions in the universe theories, as being what their governing assumptions. And that being the case, you're talking about frequency being the key means by which you move from one dimension to another. You somehow change your frequency. I still don't understand all of the science to this, but
if you do C, E, G as a chord, all three notes, those three frequencies can exist as a chord, but each one is separate.
Mm-hmm.
That is the other dimensional. Interdimensional.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. So how plasmas relate to this? John was just bringing up during the break a connection between plasmas and frequency and dimensions, and I thought, aha, this is very interesting. The science of plasma is not really something that I'm strong on. I don't want to make a comment and just sound foolish by not knowing what I'm talking about. But I do know that plasma has been integral to understanding UFOs for a long time, at least scientifically. And so I think that as far as using it in terms of future technology, future weapons, future propulsion, transportation, all of this makes it very important and obviously classified.
Well, one of the interesting things is like even at Rendlesham, we saw different coloring. And when you go into it, we've had a couple of scientists on that have said this, the different coloring are different frequencies. Now, you have these reports like Paul reported on, where you'll see lighting and electromagnetic fields. And then maybe after that, then they'll see the object. Now, the interesting thing is this object that you see after you see the light, the different colored lighting and everything else, is it decloaking? Was it using that to cover it, as it came in? Or was it just coming in from some other dimension? But it's there, and it looks one way 1 minute, and even people describe it looking at it differently from different angles. But it seems like that's important. And you've got to believe that that would lead to whatever how they start to understand this, create these EM generators and this ability to use plasma and stuff, that whoever could control that, whatever country could control it, or PAC, NATO, I guess there's no more Warsaw, but if they could control this and learn how to utilize it, it would give them a distinct advantage over the enemy, you know. And one of the things that people understand, that F-35, the F-35, you know what makes that so different than any other aircraft?
No, what?
It's the helmet. It's telepathic.
Oh, yeah. I've heard this as well.
Right. They're able to, the pilot flies the plane with the helmet, with the brain. Okay. And where did they learn this? And, you know, I mean, there's so much going on right now. Did they learn this from recovered craft? Did they learn this from, how did they learn this? And how are we advancing? And like, Paul, where have you seen them change it from UFO to UAP?
I first saw that. The first time I saw that was in British Ministry of Defence files releases. No, actually, the French. It's not the translation's not going to be exact, obviously, but the French use the word other than using the word object or device, or, you know, back in the 50s it would be flying saucer. The French started using the word phenomena, and it's like, I don't know what it is. It's like de-phenomene or whatever it is, and they probably started doing that. I would have thought something like 1992. Like the French Japan or the national, like the national gendarme, like the police forces. But the first time I started seeing it in UFO policy or procedural material or say internal opinion pieces was from the Ministry of Defence files, starting off in maybe 2000, something like that. But I mean, I think that, I haven't looked at the Ministry of Defence files from the 90s really, really heavily, not page for page, but obviously Project Condign was written in, I think it was penned in 1996 or something. So obviously they were using the word phenomena and unidentified aerial phenomena or air phenomena. They were unknown aerial phenomena. UAP, they were obviously using it in the 90s because, you know, the lead up to Project Conan would have taken 2 years. I mean, it's a contractual agreement with an outside with a firm or a think tank outside the British Ministry of Defence. So they've obviously settled on a word.
You know what's interesting about that is the phrase UAP. The term was coined by Dr. Richard Haynes. I'm almost certain of this. Back in 1980 or 81 at the latest. That was his creation.
Well, think about this for a minute. Think about this for a minute. All the MOD policy files, if you look at them, the ones that they held back and they've been discovered, they go UFO until 2000. Now, if I remember right, because I don't have all this in front of me, 96 was when they commissioned the report. Yep. They wrote it. It was released inside to only 9 ministers or whatever inside the MOD in 2000. That's when the policy changed from UFO to UAP. And not only that, it was a scientific report. Now the skeptics say it wasn't, but it was. They were drawn from documents. So what documents and what studies and what work are they doing on? Are they doing to now change this from UFO? Because basically, unidentified flying object could be anything.
Yeah, you'd have to ask. I mean, like I know a bit about this. The material that to produce project to produce the Condign report. Obviously, you've got this 390 whatever page report that's in 3 huge sections, big voluminous sections. Obviously, they had to use something. Now, some of it would be open source material, like in books and on the early internet, and some of it would have been material like mirror copies of UFO reports, UFO policy, UFO response. So I believe that Nick Pope's area within the Ministry of Defence, there was mirror copies, like literally photocopies held at DI 55 within the Defence Intelligence Services or the Defence Scientific and Technical area of the British intelligence and defence apparatus. So obviously the Condign report drew on thousands and thousands of pages of statistical analysis, like basic statistical analysis and reports from pilots and so on. So I think that to answer your question about UFO versus UAP, it's just something that, like Richard was saying, that it was actually Richard Haynes in the United States, the ex-NASA flight safety scientist, who coined the term in about 1981. But I mean, as far as government agencies using it, it's obviously the French and the British started using it in the 1990s. What changed their minds on that? Maybe the term UFO was just too loaded. I mean, it's like getting rid of the word flying saucer in, say, 1957, 58, 59. I mean, the term is just so loaded that you move on to unidentified flying objects or unidentified or unconventional objects. Now we've moved on again to UAP within the British and the French governmental police, Air Force, whatever systems. Maybe in 20 years they'll use a different term. Maybe they won't.
Yeah, but Paula, haven't you noticed something though? When I read Condign and I've read some of the older documents, they're starting to zero in on what it is and what its capabilities are.
Sure.
Where before it was just a UFO.
Sure.
Jimmy Bob was in the field and he saw this disc come down.
Sure.
And as we've gone along,
it's still interesting, John. The Condign still is there's still like this tepid nature about it, where you don't really, the authors don't come out. They're still very, very cautious in my view in how they describe this. Don't you think?
Well, yeah, and not only that, they won't identify who it is. They don't. I caught him twice. I was able to word it, and that's one of the reasons why they don't want my FOIAs out there. They don't want them out. I've held them back. Linda's posted a couple, and we've talked a little bit about them. But I was specifically looking for certain technologies, certain abilities. And that's how the initial clerk screwed up and said, oops, yeah, we're holding more files that we plan on releasing in the future. So that was the first mistake they made. Then I got them to admit that they've developed technology off of it, which, oops, by the way, now we're done talking to you. And now I still can't ask them any more questions, because what they said was, after I asked that question and they admitted that there was, defense companies working on technology, they said, we'll no longer answer any more of your questions until all these files have been released. So they're holding back files. And a lot of this is still redacted. And so much of it's still redacted within the report. And then they sit there and say, like, the helicopter theory, like it was all helicopters in Vietnam. Well, wait a minute. Time out. There's no way the amount of redactions they've done in the Condign report and then these new files that it's all just our own technology. Do you know what I'm saying? There's more to this.
And Paul, it was very interesting what you sent in your email about the October 2002 United States Department of Defense manual about how armed forces should manage photos, videos, and movie film. And what they do in here, and this is going back 2002, that's going back at least 15 years, it says, this is from the manual page that you sent in the email, unidentified flying object in paren UFO and other aerial phenomena imagery. And then the following table, it identifies the subjects that they are interested in getting film, video, and photos from. Aerial flying objects not obviously identifiable as conventional aircraft, aerial phenomena including moving lights and similar phenomena. And then there is this direction that if anybody in the military, to which this is going out as a universal request, that they would end up with motion picture, camera, video, or film, that is to be handled through an Appendix 2. And I was curious if you ever have been able to have access to Appendix 2.
Yeah, I have. So, yeah, just to sum up for the reader, this is actually a document. I didn't personally find it I did re-find it. Very few people knew about it. John Greenwald had actually seen it, and a bloke in England called David Carmichael had seen it as well. But I wanted to write about this, and what it is basically the Assistant Secretary of Defence promulgates these big documents called instructions, and one of them was called DOD Instruction Lifecycle Management for Visual Information. And in there, within that particular instruction, there is reference to a particular manual, like a booklet, and it's called Decision Logic Table Instructions for Recording and Handling Visual Information. And yeah, on page 53, right there, the heading is Unidentified Flying Object, UFO, and other aerial phenomena imagery. And it does say that there's two categories of UFOs. One is aerial flying objects, and the other one is aerial phenomena. And this applies to the Army, applies to the Air Force, applies to the Navy at all levels, from unified combatant command level right down to unit level. And any person within it, could be on a plane or at an air traffic control center or on a Coast Guard ship, anyone that actually images a UFO, whether it's a drone or a plane or a contrail or something more mysterious, is asked to send it through something called the local CAP, which is Component Accession Point, which is basically like a glorified mail center within that particular command. So if someone photographs a UFO from say an Air Force base in, I don't know, Louisiana, they would submit that to their duty officer, who would submit that to the command running that base. It could be Air Force Systems Command, it could be Global Strike Command, or whatever. But then finally, the material is handled. It says that material is handled via Appendix 2, and I'm just looking up. Yeah, Appendix 2 is titled Media Handling Instructions for Other Subjects, and it just says it says that it says that original video recordings and photographs of anything, whether it's UFOs or anything else, is to be sent to the CAP, that's Component Accession Point, as soon as possible. And then it says here, photographic still images are to be processed by first making digital copies of the selected camera original negative or selected camera original negatives or color transparencies, and forwarded. And then originals are sent to the DVIC, which is the Defence Visual Information Centre. Now, recently, the Defence Visual Information Centre was actually absorbed into an organisation called the Defence Imagery Management Operations Centre. So what my next plan is to do is I've done this already. I actually sent an FOI request to the Assistant Secretary of Defence highlighting this manual and saying, look, you promulgated it. You've obviously got a reason for putting the term UFO and aerial phenomena on page 53. And I said to them, I want copies of any photographs taken, any analysis of photographs or evaluation of photographs, film footage of UFOs or aerial phenomena. They came back and they told me, they said, we simply publish the manual. We're not responsible for what happens after that. So what I did now, they actually told me, go to the local unified combatant commands like Northcom, Southcom, CENTCOM, Pacific Command, whatever. So what I've got to do next is specifically ask either the Unified Combatant Commands for any photographs that their servicemen have taken of UFOs, or I'll just go straight to the Defence Imagery Management Operations Centre, which I think is in California. I'm not sure. But either way, either through the Unified Combatant Commands, where temporary files are held on UFO photographs, or permanent files and analysis are held by the DIMOC. Either way, there is possibilities for FOI requests there. I've just got to get round to doing it. I've got so many FOI requests out all over the world that it's very, very hard to keep up with. But it is rather extraordinary to see in 2002, you've got, what's crazy about it is if you go back to the instructions and regulations like Air Force Manual 5511 or Air Force Regulation 200-1 from the 1950s, they've also got sections about radar scope photography and still photography of UFOs. And you look, and in
2002, the wording is nearly the same. It's unbelievable. And they UFOs and aerial phenomena.
Yeah.
And just one other thing, Rich, really fast. It was only 7 years later that the UK former Ministry of Defence head, Lord Peter Hill Norton, he was quoted in a documentary by James Fox as saying, quote, there are objects in our atmosphere which are technically miles in advance of anything that we can deploy. that we have no means of stopping them coming here, and that we have no defense against them should they be hostile. I believe governments fear that if they did disclose those facts, people would panic, close quote. That's 2009, Lord Hill Norton, 7 years after the 2002 a DOD document we were just talking about.
I just wanted to add, when we think back on the history of this, in the U.S., the Freedom of Information Act was greatly strengthened and really made useful in the first practical way for researchers. And as we know, thousands of pages of documents were released at that time in the late 70s, early 80s, and were very significant. It made a huge impact on this field. And what it did, just for a historical reminder, in case anyone forgets, is it proved that the United States government and other governments had been lying for years and decades about UFOs. And by requisitioning documents through FOIA at that time, we had large numbers of violations of airspace that were documented, military personnel witnessing objects that were not supposed to exist and yet did exist, of unusual design and extraordinary capabilities. All of that came out during the first golden era of FOIA, we might say. And I think what we're seeing now, and what we really need to recognize, is that researchers like Paul and John and others who are doing the really difficult yeoman work of going through these documents, and particularly with Paul, finding how to get these documents and having the technical capability of reading them proficiently is also equally important. So that with that, we're actually now recognizing that the era of UFO documents isn't from the 1950s and 60s and even 70s. It's now. And there is a tremendous amount of data that is still there, and there's a lot more that we are able to get from those earlier periods as well. And I find it exciting. I just think this is fantastic.
Well, let's take that up a little bit more after our last break. Race, take us to break.
Thanks, John. For the latest in science, the environment, and real X-Files, visit the award-winning website earthfiles.com with over 2,000 in-depth reports that go way beyond the 6 o'clock news. That's earthfiles.com. Folks, we'll be right back for the final segment of tonight's interview with Paul Dean and author Richard Dolan right after these messages. Don't go anywhere.
Okay, nurse, let's get this man to the ER stat.
Right away, doctor.
We see this every day. Heart attack or angina pain due to blocked and clogged arteries. Chelation can remove obstructions or blockages from arteries and help avoid painful and expensive surgery. Now there's Angioprim. It's a liquid oral chelation product that you take with juice. You start to feel the results fast. Angioprim increases blood flow all over the body, and that means more energy and strength to take on the day with less aches and pains. 60 years of research has gone into chelation, and Angioprim is the result. A safe and easy way to unblock your veins and arteries from buildup that slow circulation.
Paging Dr. Jones. Please report to the emergency room right away.
Log on now for a special radio offer from Angioprim. That's angioprim.com/radio. ANGIOPRIM. Angioprim.com/radio or call 877-882-7221. That's 877-882-7221.
The new word on the street is bloated. Yeah, you eat this food, GMO, herbicide, pesticide. Foods aren't safe anymore. And then we eat them and we're bloated. Our stomach says, no more, Seymour. So what we have to do is drink the tea. Are you on the tea? GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Super strength tea. It will help you with the new word, bloated. You can get it today. Log on to GetTheTea.com.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Korean pressure, a new novel by Mike Gilmore. Every expert agrees China must be the solution to reining in the North Korean military and calming the rhetoric from Pyongyang. However, nobody predicts the after effect until Korean pressure. A terrorist attack in the heart of Beijing kills the Chinese First Lady. Hours later, the supreme leader of North Korea narrowly avoids assassination. The evidence points towards South Korea and the United States. And despite all efforts to control the situation by the U.S., the North Korean armed forces cross the DMZ and the Second Korean War begins. With the aid of his trusted confidants and one lone spy operating in Pyongyang, the American president must determine the truth behind both terrorist attacks before China moves their own massive military to the Korean Peninsula. Korean Pressure, exclusively on Amazon.com. Korean Pressure. Get your copy today.
For the thousands of wounded warriors returning from battle, Wounded Warrior Project has developed the Warriors to Work program, a career counseling service that helps wounded warriors translate their military experience to a civilian job. These extraordinary men and women bring more than just teamwork and inspiration to the workplace. They bring proven world-class job skills. And to ensure proper placement, Wounded Warrior Project works with employers to find just the right job fit. Talented, skilled, and eager to get back to work, you have the opportunity to hire a seasoned veteran. Contact Wounded Warrior Project at findwwp.org. Welcome home the brave.
Your alternative talk radio contact, The Planet, KGRARadio.com.
Welcome back to Phenomenon Radio Live, exclusively on KGRARadio.com for the final segment of the program tonight with our very special and honored guests, U.S. historian and author Richard M. Dolan, and all the way from the Southern Hemisphere in beautiful Australia, UFO researcher, investigator Paul Dean. Once again, here's John Burroughs.
Thanks, Race. As we go into the last part of the show, as Richard was saying when we went to break, there was the initial work done in FOIA. We had Condon and Condign. Condon was earlier, and now Condign has just been recently done. It's a new report as far as UFOs go, UH/UAPs. But what we have is a continuation where, as you dig deeper and deeper and start to understand it better and better, you start to zero in on your questioning, which, number one, the governments of the world can't be happy with, because the more you understand this and the deeper you dig, the more you get into the real classified area, and you get into defense and technologies and stuff, whether they're off-world or they're our own developments. But that's where this is why it's being covered more than anything. Would you guys not agree?
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
Yeah.
You're dealing with it's an unknown phenomenon that has implications, but it is absolutely dealing with defense-related technologies that these guys want to weaponize and want to use for their own benefit.
Yeah, there's no, and the chances of getting it out. I mean, you've got look at it from a complete. We're looking at possibly. I don't like to use the word, from almost like a very narrow point of view. You think, let's say there's a technology that really is almost science fiction. Let's say there's a technology, a type of metallurgical technology, a lightweight metal that can, withstand 7,000 degrees, blah, 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 right? There's no way, I mean, they're not going to release say in America's case, the American taxpayer, for starters, is paying for it. You've got private firms, for rightly or wrongly, who are involved, and there's no way, under simple laws like the Freedom of Information Act or the mandatory declassification review process, that documents, files, PowerPoint presentations, samples or whatever are going to be released while they are still in test and evaluation phase. There's no way you want the enemy, or you want subversive organizations or overseas firms to have technology or systems, logistical technology, computer technology, whatever it is, that your government staffers have slaved over for decades. One thing from Project Condign, or the Condign report, is that it was written in 1996 and it was released in, I suppose, 2004 or something, with a few redactions, but it was released. Now, we're in 2017 now, so I assume someone, and I think someone has done this, I just don't know who, someone's got to go back to the Ministry of Defence and ask what came of all this. Were the recommendations and the opinion pieces in the conclusion section of Project Condign actually taken up by, some sort of joint warfare analysis centre or a technology development firm or a contractual arrangement? Even America, when the document itself was released, obviously everyone in the world saw it. So, did America's Air Test Development Centre, for example, or Office of Naval Intelligence or Office of Naval Research, did they take up some of those recommendations and move straight into, say, a plasma technology area, or had they already done it? Someone's going to have to directly ask either a minister or a lord or use the Freedom of Information Act in a very, very focused, precise area to ask, what actually came of these recommendations, or are they still sitting on them? That would be one area. It's not my particular area. I'm interested in UFO policy and instructions, but someone's going to have to ask the Ministry of Defence, if no one else, about this. What actually happened.
Yeah. Well, kind of Lord Blackwell did, because
I know.
He did ask them if they've developed technology or weapons off of this, and the answer was no. But this is where they get you, because the government has separated themselves by giving it to defense contractors. So the government can deny that they're directly involved. And so many of the people that worked inside the MOD and Department of Defense become government contractors.
Sure. Yeah, that's a problem. It's a very grey area. How can you've got a completely private firm that's listed on the stock exchange that's doing, say, test and developmental brainstorming and think tank work on a brand new type of potential technology, right? It's not applicable. The lords and ministers and undersecretaries can ask all they want, and they're either going to get lies or they're going to get lies, but then they're going to get a tap on the shoulder later saying we couldn't really tell you, but yeah, the answer's yes, or they're going to get the truth one day. But either way, it's a very, very slow process. The UFO topic and everything around it, slowness defines this topic. Like I was saying before, the 1969 Edward U. Condon's UFO study team was a 900-page report. Now, what went into it was 10,000 pages. It's taken till the year 2010 or 2011 for us to find the background material that went into that. And some of it's just Project Blue Book and Project Sign files. But a lot of it, like I was saying before, is trip notes and budgetary material, interviews and letters and internal memos and even really basic stuff like petrol logs and so on. It's all been sitting there at the American Philosophical Institute in Philadelphia, right where it should have been. But no one until the year 2002 actually went and got this material. You've got this famous 900-page UFO study by the University of Colorado, yet all the citations, or most of the citable material, was never published. And why would it be? It's a lot of private information, complaints, various arguments, etc., classified trip notes and so on. It's all been sitting there in Philadelphia all this time. And
I think only in the last little more than a decade. I don't think it's been there this entire time. Am I wrong?
Well, mate, look, I don't know. I know that when Dr. Michael Swords and his assistant went to look for it, it was sitting right there in 2001. Look, it might not have been 2001. It might have been 2005 or something. I know that he went there in the 2000s and it was sitting there right on the shelf. Now, whether it's been there all that time, like maybe it was in a different area, maybe it was maybe it was within research R&D section, a temporary archive for US Air Force R&D within the Science Directorate or something. I don't know, but I know that in the 2000s there was boxes of the background material that was sitting there. So no one other than, I believe that Phil Klass did actually, Phil Klass and possibly Stanton Friedman did actually ask the University of Colorado or the American Philosophical Institute in about maybe 1982, 83 for all the background material that went into the UFO study of 1969. And I think that they were generally given the runaround. I think that they were told that we'll find it later, effectively. But the point is what I'm trying to say is that research in this field from researchers, like me or any of us, like Richard when he was doing his first two books, the research is very slow. FOI is slow. Getting access to archives is slow. Reading microfiche film is slow. Digging up newspaper articles is slow. Scanning through unsearchable PDFs is slow. Getting onto a base for a tour is slow. It just goes on and on and on. The serious aspect of UFO research is defined by its incredible slowness, and it's got lack of manpower. There are very, very few people that are, on a planet of nearly 8 billion people, there is literally only a handful of people doing really, really focused, deliberate, goal-orientated, mission-orientated sort of UFO work where and so it's most people loll around on Facebook and blah 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 blah, and it's very rare that someone does something that's absolutely never been done before. So you're up against, if you're looking for technology from a private firm and it's got 3 people to do it and they're all civilians from another country, it's going to be a long battle.
Indeed.
No, it will. And that's the interesting thing. People say, what's wrong with ufology? Okay. And ultimately, you can have the glamour, these, like what MUFON just did with their little gala and all this other stuff. Yeah. But there's no money being given to people that want to do serious research. But just like you would think that somebody that's sponsoring all this other nonsense would give some money to do a guy like you, Paul, or a group, and let you go over to the UK and go in there and go through these documents.
I'll give you an example. Joe Firmage put an ad in, I think it was the New York Times, but it could have been the New York Post, I'm not sure, it could have been 1989, 1990 or something. Joe Firmage put an ad in a major newspaper on a big ad, and apparently it cost, I think it was $15,000 US. Now remember, this is over 20 years ago, so that's,
it would have been 1999 or so.
Right, 1999. So okay. Well, imagine what that is worth now, right? What we could do, what people like me, but particularly someone like Barry Greenwood in Boston, or Fran Ridge, who runs kneecap.org, or various others, what they could do, or what we could do with the equivalent of $20,000 to absolutely flood the various Vietnam archives, the National Archives, in this case now the UK Archives at the Public Records Office in London. What we could do now to physically go and dig up stuff and actually go and get copies of Crown release material in England, like these 15 files of 18, or go to the National Archives, look through squadron and wing level records, I'll give you an example. Richard Dolan, I know that you know of the Brigadier Carol H. Belinda memo of October 1969. Sure. We've discussed that. Now, what's interesting is there were 16 attachments. There were 16 attachments to that 3-page memo. There's 5 that have been identified. One of them, for instance, was just the Robinson panel, right? But there's quite a few that have never been identified. I mean, in the actual Belinda memo, it says, there'll be a sentence and then it'll say bracket attachment 17, bracket attachment 10 or whatever. We've never identified those attachments, and those attachments will be policy statements, top secret opinion pieces, recommendations, maybe a case or two, whatever. So we know that to search the materials of R&D within the United States Air Force is going to be very slow. We need to go to the National Archives. We need to get someone at the National Archives under the FOIA Act to go through, say, 50 boxes of material looking for these 16 attachments. Well, it costs money. It costs quite a bit of time. We've got such specific projects dating from the 40s right through till now that need to be done. Urgent procedures that need to be done before material is lost, or it is so old that it is literally falling apart, right? And we've got no funds to do it, and very few people are interested. It is actually very hard to go through newspapers and microfiche and films, maps and charts. It's very, very hard to do. It's very hard to identify, acronyms, very, very long strings of acronyms to formulate very pointed FOI requests. And there's so much mucking around, so much waste of money on conferences that are forgettable, on on sort of bunk freedom of information requests that are never going to go anywhere. There was so much effort wasted on this stuff.
Well, just think of this, and I'm not trying to bag on the citizens' hearing that they did. Okay,
sure.
Just think if you got 25% of that.
Yeah.
What you could do, what they spent on that citizens' hearing.
What me and myself, Jan Aldrich, Barry Greenwood, various others could do with that, and I mean not wasting it. I mean like a full agenda, a full sort of, what would you call it, like a proceedings, a budgeted line itemed effort, like from most important things right down to the least important things. Like a very, very important thing would be to find a document called the Estimate of the Situation, which will be in, which Richard will know, which will be in either Air Force Intelligence or Air Force R&D in 1948 top secret policy files, if it still exists. Another very important thing to get hold of will be any statistical summary. We do know, we were saying before about nuclear missiles being interfered with by UFOs. We've actually found a document that's called statistical, quite seriously, right? I think it's called Statistical Summary of Unknown Phenomena or Objects Seen During Vandenberg Missile Launches.
Wow.
Right, we can't get this doc. We've got to find the apparently it is actually missing. Like apparently they did actually find it. Jan Aldrich actually did. I think Jan Aldrich actually did find this document. It was actually housed at the Defense.
What a title!
I'll have to get it. I think it's called Statistical Summary of Unidentified Objects related to missile launches, and I think the agency was the Army Missile Defense Agency, and the particular file was a Vandenberg Air Force Base file. So it's definitely related to Atlas and Titan missile launches from Vandenberg, and it's not some 1959 document either. This is from 1972. So we're moving into the age where UFOs were apparently dead. You've got sort of digital technology now, like you've got, like excellent radar tracking data, and you've got like digital presentations and so on. So this is going to be a very interesting document. Well, guess what? We don't have any funds. We are sitting around photocopying stuff and reading old newspaper archives because we have no funds. And yeah, it's...
I think that anyone listening to the show tonight, some of these people that, are serious about this, that maybe have some money, that really want to move something forward, would be to get a group of people like you, Paul, Richard, and some of these other people done, Linda, and done this research and really go after this. Because that's where the bread and butter is. It's not the arguing on the internet, are we alone or not, or, who knows more than the other person. It's backtracing and going forward to today with documents and what they show and what's going on. Not some of this other nonsense that continues and keeps
it's
going
work
on.
like people like Paul are doing. That's the key, and then it will be necessary to be able to encapsulate that information, because what Paul knows as well as anyone is you've got a tremendous amount of data in all of these documents, but if it's not properly interpreted and understood and explained to the rest of the world, it's going to just be lost. So,
okay,
and guys, and Paul, I don't want to cut you off, but we just got noticed we're out of time.
Okay, so, I'll just say one thing quickly. I found the title of that document I was talking about. We've even got a code. We've even got a US Air Force Document Records Management Library code. It's AD D513256, and it is titled Summary of Signature and Statistical Data of Unidentified Objects Observed During ICBM Missions.
Wow.
And
amazing.
Yeah, no joke. And the actual agency, although it comes from Vandenberg, that's where the file was physically created, the actual controlling agency is the U.S. Army Space and Missiles Defense Command in Huntsville, Alabama.
Wow. Yeah. Wonderful.
Well, guys, I wish we had more time. Maybe we can do this again sooner than later. Yeah. Thanks for coming on, Paul and Richard.
Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure.
That's going to do it for another edition of Phenomenon Radio Live. It's hard to believe how fast time goes when you're having such a wonderful time. Interesting content. Thank you all so much for joining us here tonight. Next week on Phenomenon Radio, you'll want to join us for Win Keach as he joins the program. For John Burroughs, Linda Moulton Howe, our very honored guests, Paul Dean and Richard M. Dolan, I am producer Race Hobbs, thanking all of you once again for joining us. Stay tuned now for 3 hours of Jimmy Church and Fade to Black Live coming right up on your official contact for the best paranormal UFO talk radio on the planet, KGRARadio.com. Have a great night and a great weekend, everybody.